"Come home with me if you want," lone rancher said to Chinese woman sleeping on Christmas Eve. The wind had already begun to howl across the wide Montana plains by the time Tom Hargrove finished his last delivery of hay for the night. He checked his watch, saw the date glowing in the dark cabin of his truck, and exhaled softly. It was Christmas Eve, a night he usually spent quietly at home with a warm fire, a simple meal, and memories that kept him company more than any celebration ever did. His ranch was miles away, sitting alone in the open land, surrounded by rolling fields now buried under snow. It was a peaceful place, though sometimes too quiet for a man who lived by himself. The sky had turned from soft gray to a heavy darkness that pressed down on everything. Snowflakes danced in the headlights, falling faster and thicker than before, turning the road into a pale ribbon. Tom had lived all his life in Montana and had seen more storms than he could count, but tonight felt harsher than usual. The cold didn't just bite, it wrapped around him like a warning. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and turned up the heater, hoping it would keep the cold air from creeping into the truck. The radio wasn't getting a good signal, so he switched it off. The only sounds left were the hum of the engine and the wind battering against the windows. Christmas music would have felt too cheerful anyway. He wasn't in the mood for jingling bells or joyful choirs. Holidays reminded him of people no longer there, his parents, his childhood friends who had moved away, the small circle of life he used to have. Now he had his ranch, his horses, and his work. They kept him busy and steady like anchor points in his life. Still, nights like this could make even a man like him feel the weight of being alone. The snowstorm grew stronger as he drove along the empty highway. There were no other vehicles on the road, no headlights appearing from behind or ahead. It was as though the world had folded into silence. The ranching towns around this area were small, and most families were indoors by now, warm and celebrating. The rest stops between towns usually stood quiet on holidays, especially in storms like this. As he approached a stretch of road he knew by heart, the faint glow of an old rest stop sign appeared in the distance. The place was nothing special, just a couple of benches under a metal canopy, a vending machine that rarely worked, and a dim security light that stayed on all night. Travelers used it in summer months when the weather was warm, but in winter it was mostly forgotten. Tom was about to pass it like he always did, but something caught his eye through the falling snow. A small shape, barely visible, lying on one of the benches under the flickering light. At first he thought it might be some snow that had drifted into a strange shape, maybe a bag left behind by someone earlier in the day. But the longer he looked, the more the shape seemed too still and too human. His instinct told him to keep driving. People sometimes stopped to rest, and it wasn't his place to interfere. But then he imagined the temperature outside, the sharp cold that stung even when he stepped out for a few seconds. No one could sit or sleep outside in this weather without being in danger. Something wasn't right. With a sigh that came from a mix of worry and responsibility, he slowed the truck and turned into the small rest area. His tires crunched through the deepening snow, and he pulled as close to the benches as he could. The wind pushed at his door as he stepped out, and the cold slapped his face instantly, making his eyes water. He pulled his coat tighter and walked toward the bench. The small shape didn't move. When he got close enough, he finally saw her clearly, a young woman curled up with her knees near her chest, her thin jacket pulled tight around her shoulders. Her black hair spilled out across her face. She didn't look like someone who had simply chosen to rest. She looked exhausted, maybe even freezing. Tom cleared his throat softly so he wouldn't startle her too much. "Ma'am," he said gently. "You okay?" She stirred, lifting her head slowly. Her eyes blinked up at him in confusion, as though it took her a few seconds to remember where she was. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her lips pale. She sat up straighter, brushing her hair from her face. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, delicate and tired, with an accent that Tom could hear even in her first whispered words. "I'm okay, sorry," she murmured, trying to pull her jacket tighter. Tom shook his head. "You're gonna freeze out here, you waiting for someone." She shook her head lightly. "No, I missed a bus." He nodded slowly, trying to piece together her situation. "Next one won't come tonight in this weather," he said. "Maybe not even tomorrow morning." She looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly together. "I know," she whispered, "but I had nowhere else to go." Something tightened in Tom's chest. He had seen people stranded before, travelers, hikers, tourists who underestimated the Montana winter. but never someone this unprepared, this fragile against the cold. She looked like she was fighting sleep simply because the cold wouldn't allow it. "You can't stay out here," he said softly, but more firmly than before. "It's too cold. You need somewhere warm." Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his, full of hesitation and worry. She didn't know him, and he didn't expect her to trust him immediately. But he also wasn't about to leave her to face a freezing night alone. He took a slow breath and tried again. "Look, I'm headed home. My ranch is about 20 minutes from here. It's warm, safe. You can rest there until the storm passes. I can bring you back when the weather clears." She shook her head quickly, frightened at the idea. "No, I don't want to trouble you." "It's no trouble," he replied, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. Bringing a stranger home on Christmas Eve was not what he had planned, but something inside him insisted it was the right thing to do. He couldn't explain it, it just felt wrong to leave her. "I'll be fine," she added, trying to smile though her face looked stiff from the cold. Tom looked at her, at the snow collecting around her feet, at the thin jacket that barely covered her arms. His voice softened even further. "You're not fine, and I'd worry myself sick if I drove away and left you like this." Those words seemed to surprise her, as though she wasn't used to someone caring about her well-being. She blinked slowly, then lowered her gaze again. Her shoulders trembled, whether from the cold or from emotion he couldn't tell. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to pressure her, but he also couldn't be silent. Finally, in a quiet voice that carried both concern and sincerity, he said the words that would stay with her long after that night. "Come home with me if you want." There was no demand or expectation in his tone. It was an invitation, soft and simple, a choice she could accept or refuse. The cold wind swept through the quiet rest stop again. She looked around at the empty land, the dark road, the falling snow that only grew thicker with each passing minute. She hugged herself tightly, realizing how alone she truly was out here. Then she looked back at him, this tall, worn-faced rancher with gentle eyes and a kind voice, and for a moment she let herself hope that maybe he meant what he said. Maybe he really wanted to help. "Okay," she whispered at last. I will come." Tom nodded with relief, offering his hand to help her stand. She rose slowly, her legs stiff from sitting in the cold. Together they walked toward his truck, the wind pushing against them but no longer feeling as harsh. He opened the door for her, helped her climb inside, and made sure the heater was blowing warm air in her direction. As he settled into the driver's seat, he glanced at her briefly. She was looking around the truck, unsure, nervous, but also clearly grateful to be somewhere warm. The snowstorm outside continued to rage, but inside, for the first time that night, the world felt a little less cold. He put the truck in drive and pulled back onto the empty highway, heading toward the ranch where a quiet, unexpected Christmas Eve was waiting for both of them. One neither of them could have predicted, yet both somehow needed. The windshield wipers pushed the heavy snow aside. Again and again, as Tom drove carefully along the quiet road. The storm was still loud outside, but inside the truck, there was a stillness that felt almost delicate. The young woman sat quietly in the passenger seat, her hands placed neatly on her lap, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. She looked small in the thick winter coat Tom had handed her before they left the rest stop, and even smaller inside the large cabin of the truck. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the engine and the wind brushing against the truck. Tom didn't want to rush her into talking, but he also didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. So he kept his voice gentle when he finally said, "I'm Tom, by the way, Tom Hargrove." She turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes for a brief moment. "My name is Lena," she said softly. Her voice had a musical quality, but there was a tiredness underneath it. "That's a pretty name," he said without trying to sound too cheerful. He didn't want to overwhelm her. She gave a small, polite smile before looking out the window again. Snowflakes danced across the glass, glowing briefly under the headlights before disappearing into the darkness. "You warm enough?" he asked after a moment. "Yes, much better now," she replied. She tucked her hands into the sleeves of the coat, hiding them inside the soft warmth. "Thank you." Tom nodded, though she wasn't looking at him. "You're welcome." Silence returned, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. It was simply two people sharing the same space, getting used to each other's presence. Tom kept glancing at her very subtly, just enough to see if she seemed okay. He noticed the way her eyes moved quickly, as if trying to understand everything around her. She looked nervous but not frightened, just uncertain, unsure of what to expect. After a while, Tom asked gently, "If you don't mind me asking, what happened with the bus?" She sighed, her breath fogging the window slightly before fading. "I was traveling to see my cousin in Seattle. I had been moving from one city to another for a while, trying to find work and a place to stay. The bus company changed the schedule because of the weather, and the next bus was delayed. They dropped us off at different stops, and I didn't understand the instructions very well. Before I could ask again, the bus left." She paused, swallowing. "I thought I could wait there until morning, but I didn't think the weather would get this bad." Tom listened carefully, feeling a gentle ache in his chest. She spoke with such honesty, and every word held a quiet strength, a strength that had probably carried her through many difficult days. "How long were you waiting there?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'm not sure. Maybe hours. I tried to stay awake, but I was so tired and cold." He nodded slowly. "You shouldn't have had to go through that alone." Lena lowered her gaze. "I didn't want to bother anyone. I don't like causing trouble." "You weren't causing trouble," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Anyone would want to help in that situation." She gave another small smile, one that looked fragile, like it could disappear at any moment. She wasn't used to kindness, he realized. Maybe she had been traveling too long without someone offering a warm word or a safe place. "Where are you from?" he asked softly, hoping she wouldn't mind sharing. "From China," she replied. "From a small town. I came to America for school. I studied English for a while, but it is still hard for me sometimes. Then my student visa changed, and I had to leave my classes. I worked in different places, but it was never stable. That's why I wanted to go to my cousin. She said she would help me find something better." Tom nodded slowly. He didn't know much about visas or international students, but he understood what she was saying. She had been trying to build a life, one step at a time, even when everything around her kept shifting. "It must have been tough," he said gently. She shrugged lightly. "Everyone has something tough. I just keep going." There was gratitude in her voice, but also humility. She wasn't telling her story to get sympathy. She was simply explaining, like someone used to surviving without expecting help. Tom respected that. He admired it even. The truck hit a small patch of rough snow, and Lena grabbed the side of the seat instinctively. Tom slowed down a little more, keeping his voice calm. "Don't worry, we're almost there. The roads near my ranch are usually clearer because not many people drive on them." "Your ranch," she repeated softly, as if testing the words. "You live by yourself?" "Yes," Tom said. "Just me, some horses, and a dog who thinks he owns the place." That made her smile wider than before. "A dog? Yeah, his name's Cooper, big old guy, harmless as a lamb, but he likes to pretend he's a guard dog." Lena nodded, amused. "I like animals," she said simply. "You'll like Cooper then," Tom assured her. The snow outside began to lighten slightly as the road opened into a wider view, though there was still no sign of houses or buildings. Montana nights could feel endless, especially in winter. But Tom knew every bend, every tree, every fence. It was home even in the darkest storms. After a few minutes, Lena asked quietly, "Why did you stop for me?" Tom's grip on the wheel tightened just a little. He wanted to give her the right answer, something honest, something that wouldn't make her feel uncomfortable. "You looked like you needed help," he said, "and no one deserves to sit alone in the cold on Christmas Eve." She looked down at her hands again, as if absorbing those words. For a moment she said nothing, but Tom could sense something shifting in her expression, a warmth, a softening. "Thank you," she said again, more firmly this time. "I mean it." "You're welcome," he replied gently, "and you don't need to thank me so much. I'm just glad I was driving by." She nodded slowly. "Still, thank you." The truck continued through the snowy road, and with every mile she seemed to relax just a little more. The tension in her shoulders eased, and her breathing grew steadier. She leaned her head lightly against the window, watching the snow fall like white feathers drifting from the sky. "You must have been scared," Tom added quietly. Lena hesitated before answering. "A little, but I try not to think too much when something bad happens. I just tell myself, this is only one moment, keep going to the next one." Tom smiled softly. "That's a strong way to think." She gave a shy lift of her shoulders. "Maybe, but sometimes it is hard." "I understand," Tom said. "I've had moments like that, too." She turned her head slightly, curiosity in her eyes. "You?" "Sure," he replied. "Life doesn't stop being difficult just because we grow older." She nodded slowly, as though she understood exactly what he meant. They fell into another thoughtful silence, but this time it felt natural. Not awkward, not heavy, just peaceful. As they neared his ranch, Tom noticed the porch light shining faintly in the distance, glowing warm against the snowy landscape. He always left it on, a habit he picked up from his mother, who believed a home should always have a welcoming light. "There it is," he said gently. "Home." Lena sat up straighter, eyes widening a bit as she saw the small but sturdy house, the barn beside it, and the soft glow coming from inside. It wasn't a grand place, but it stood strong against the winter night, offering warmth and shelter. "It looks nice," she whispered. "It's simple," Tom said, "but it's safe and warm." He drove up to the house, the tires crunching through the snow again. As he parked, Cooper, the big old dog, appeared in the window, tail wagging with excitement at the sight of the headlights. His ears perked up immediately. Lena watched him and couldn't help smiling. "He's cute," Tom chuckled. "Wait till he tries to sit in your lap. He thinks he's a puppy." He turned off the engine, and the car lights faded, leaving the glow of the porch light and the comfort it promised. Before stepping out, he looked at her gently. "You ready?" he asked. Lena nodded, though she still looked a little unsure. "Yes." They stepped out into the cold, but this time the cold didn't feel as sharp. Maybe it was the warm house waiting for them. Maybe it was the quiet companionship they had started to build in the truck. Maybe it was the simple relief of no longer being alone on a night when loneliness felt heavier than usual. As they walked toward the front door together, something soft and hopeful settled in the air, something neither of them quite understood yet, but both felt deeply, quietly, and gratefully. When Tom pushed open the front door of his home, a gentle wave of warm air drifted out, carrying the scent of wood, fresh hay, and the faint smell of something he had cooked earlier in the evening. The house was simple, tidy, and full of quiet comfort. For most people, it might have seemed plain, but for Tom, it held years of memories and a sense of steady peace. Cooper came trotting toward them immediately, his tail wagging so hard that his whole back end swayed. He was a large golden dog with soft eyes and a personality that made everyone feel welcome. When he reached Tom, he let out a happy huff, then turned his head slowly toward Lena. Lena smiled, her eyes softening. "Hello," she said quietly, reaching her hand out. Cooper sniffed her fingers gently, then leaned forward and pressed his head into her hand, deciding instantly that she was a friend. She laughed softly, surprised that such a big dog could be so gentle. "He likes you already," Tom said as he hung his coat on the hook near the door. "He is very sweet," Lena replied, her smile growing as Cooper continued to nudge her gently. "You can hang your coat there," Tom said, pointing to another hook. "And you can take your boots off, makes the floor easier to clean." She nodded and slipped out of the coat carefully, folding it over her arm before placing it on the hook. Her clothes underneath were simple, worn from travel. She looked around the living room quietly, taking in the wooden walls, the stone fireplace, the shelves filled with books, and the soft light glowing from a lamp in the corner. "It's warm," she whispered half to herself. "Thank you," Tom replied. "I try to keep it that way. Cold floors never felt right to me." Lena placed her hands close to the heater vent near the wall and let the warm air blow across her fingers. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the warmth sink into her. Tom stood nearby, giving her a moment to settle. He knew she was probably overwhelmed, new place, new person, unfamiliar surroundings. Everything was happening fast for her. "You must be hungry," he said gently. "I didn't eat much earlier. I can make something simple." She shook her head lightly. "I don't want to trouble you." "It's not trouble," Tom reassured her, "and I can't let a guest go hungry." The word guest seemed to surprise her. She looked up with a soft expression, unsure how to respond. Tom simply smiled in a small, kind way, then walked into the kitchen. Lena followed slowly, curious but cautious, as though she wasn't sure how much space she could take. The kitchen had a wooden table, a few chairs, and a counter that had seen many years of cooking. Tom opened a cabinet and pulled out ingredients with practiced ease. "I'll make some soup," he said. "Nothing fancy, but hot food helps on nights like this." She nodded and watched quietly as he chopped vegetables, each motion smooth and steady. It was clear he had done this many times before. Lena sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of water he had given her earlier. "Do you do everything here alone?" she asked softly. "Mostly," Tom said without looking up from the cutting board. "I've been on my own for a few years now. I take care of the animals, the land, the house. It's a lot of work, but it keeps me busy." "Do you ever feel lonely?" she asked before she could stop herself. Tom paused for a moment, then resumed chopping. "Sometimes," he admitted. It's quiet here. Some days the quiet feels peaceful, other days it feels empty, I guess. Lena nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. When he looked at her, she gave him a small, sad smile. I have felt alone in many places, even in big cities, she added. Sometimes crowded places make me feel more alone. Tom stirred the vegetables in the pot, thinking about her words. You must miss home, he said gently. She sighed softly. I do, but I left because I wanted a different life. I wanted to learn to grow to help my family someday. It just turned out harder than I expected. Life usually does, Tom replied, but you're here now and you're safe. She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the wood grain. Thank you for helping me, she whispered again. You don't have to thank me, he said, his voice quiet. Anyone would have done the same. She looked up, meeting his eyes for a moment. Not everyone stops for strangers, she said softly, not in storms like that. Tom didn't know what to say to that. He simply nodded and turned back to the pot. Cooper lay at Lena's feet now, his head resting on her slippers as if keeping watch. They stayed like that for a few peaceful minutes, Tom cooking, Lena warming up, Cooper resting comfortably, until the soup began to simmer softly, filling the kitchen with a comforting smell. Tom ladled the soup into 2 bowls and placed them on the table. Hope it tastes all right, he said. Lena smiled gratefully and picked up her spoon. The first sip made her eyes widen. It's very good, she said with a warmth that made Tom feel unexpectedly pleased. I'm glad, he replied. They ate in gentle silence for a while. Warm food, warm house, warm company. After everything Lena had been through, it felt almost unreal to sit at a safe table with someone kind. After they finished eating, Lena placed her bowl carefully on the counter. I can wash dishes, she said shyly. I want to help. You don't have to, Tom said immediately. You're tired. I want to, she insisted softly. Tom hesitated, then nodded. All right, if you really want to. She washed the dishes quietly while he put away the leftover soup. Even in the small task, she moved with gentle care, as if she wanted her presence to be as light as possible. When she finished, she dried her hands and turned to him. Where should I sleep? She asked politely. Tom wiped his hands on a towel before answering. You can take the guest room. It's small, but the bed's warm and the sheets are clean. That is more than enough, she said with genuine gratitude. He led her down a short hallway to a door painted with soft, cream-colored paint. Inside, the guest room had a neatly made bed, a small dresser, and a lamp that gave off a soft glow. A wool blanket lay folded at the foot of the bed, thick enough to keep out any winter chill. It's very nice, she whispered. Tom scratched the back of his neck, feeling a little shy. I hope it's comfortable, she nodded. It already feels safe. Something about those words touched him deeply. He hadn't heard anyone say that about his home for a long time. If you need anything, he said, pointing toward the hallway, my room is right across, and the bathroom is over there. Lena checked the bathroom quickly and was relieved to see clean towels, a small soap bar, and a quiet warmth that made the cold night feel far away. Thank you, she said again as she stood in the doorway of the guest room, for everything today. You're welcome, Tom said softly. Get some rest, you've had a long day. She nodded and stepped inside. Before closing the door, she looked at him once more and offered a small, tired smile, the kind that held sincere appreciation. Tom returned the smile, then walked back to the living room where the fireplace crackled gently. He sat down, staring at the flames as he thought about the unexpected events of the night. He hadn't planned to bring someone home, especially not a stranger, but somehow it felt right. She seemed kind, lost, and in need of a safe place. And for the first time in a long while, his house didn't feel quite as empty. Meanwhile, in the guest room, Lena sat on the bed, her hands resting on her lap. For the first time in days, she felt truly warm. She listened to the wind outside, knowing she would have been at the rest stop if Tom hadn't stopped his truck. A shiver ran through her, not from cold, but from the thought of what might have happened if she had remained there. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders, letting its warmth hug her. Cooper walked quietly to her door, lay down outside like a silent guardian, and drifted to sleep. Lena smiled softly, comforted by the presence of the gentle dog. She lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt nothing but safety. Tom sat in the living room until the fire began to fade. He stood, added another log, and looked toward the hallway where the guest room was. Though he didn't say it out loud, he felt grateful that she had accepted his offer. Something about her presence made the house feel lighter, warmer, more alive. He turned off the lights one by one, listening to the quiet crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of Cooper near the hallway. When he finally went to bed, the storm still raged outside, but inside the house, there was a calmness that felt rare and special, like a quiet gift on a night meant for miracles. And as both Tom and Lena drifted to sleep in different rooms under the same roof, neither of them realized how much this unexpected Christmas Eve would change their hearts. The soft morning light slowly entered the small ranch house, pushing away the darkness left behind by the long winter night. Snow still covered the land outside like a giant white blanket, but the storm had calmed, leaving a peaceful silence across the open fields. Inside the house, the warmth from the fireplace lingered, filling the rooms with a cozy feeling that made waking up easier. Tom woke first, as he always did. Years of ranch life had trained him to rise early. Even on holidays, even on days when he had no chores waiting, his eyes always opened with the morning. He stretched quietly in his bed, listening to the gentle quietness around him. For a few seconds, he forgot that he had a guest staying in the next room. But then he remembered Lena, and a soft sense of responsibility settled in his heart. He sat up and rubbed his hands together to warm them. The house felt different today, not empty, but gently alive. There was someone else breathing under the same roof, someone who needed rest, warmth, and a bit of kindness. It made him feel strangely hopeful. Tom stood and walked softly down the hallway, careful not to make noise. Cooper lifted his head from where he had slept near Lena's door, wagging his tail in slow, quiet circles so he wouldn't wake her. "Morning, buddy," Tom whispered, scratching the dog's head. "Let's let her sleep." Cooper seemed to agree, letting out a warm sigh before settling back down. Tom headed to the kitchen. The window above the sink was frosted at the edges, but he could still see the sun rising slowly, brushing gold across the snowy land. He took a deep breath, enjoying the view before turning to make breakfast. He wasn't a fancy cook, but he knew how to make a good, warm meal. He cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking them until they were fluffy. He set biscuits in the oven, his mother's old recipe, one he knew by heart, and started brewing coffee. The smell filled the entire kitchen almost instantly, blending with the buttery scent of the biscuits. As he cooked, he thought about the night before. He thought about the quiet girl who had trusted him enough to accept shelter. He wondered how she felt waking up in a stranger's home far from her own land. He also wondered how lonely she must have been before meeting him. Something in her eyes told him she had walked a long and difficult road. About 30 minutes later, the biscuits were golden, the eggs were perfectly cooked, and the small kitchen felt warm and bright. Tom placed 2 plates on the table, unsure if she would eat much, but wanting her to have something comforting if she did. He stepped into the hallway and knocked softly on the guest room door. "Lena," he called gently, "breakfast is ready when you are." There was a small, quiet response from inside. After a moment, the door opened slowly, and Lena stepped out, rubbing her eyes. She looked rested but still a little shy. Her hair was slightly messy, and her face held the soft glow of someone who had slept safely for the first time in days. "Good morning," Tom said with a kind smile. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "The house smells very good." "I hope you're hungry," Tom said. "I made something simple, nothing fancy." "I am hungry," she admitted with a small laugh that surprised even her. "I slept very well." Tom felt happy hearing that. "I'm glad you needed it." They walked together into the kitchen. When she saw the food laid out on the table, her eyes filled with warmth. "This looks wonderful," she said softly. Tom pulled out a chair for her. "Go ahead, eat as much as you want." She sat down, folding her hands politely before taking her first bite. Her expression changed immediately, her eyes widened, her shoulders relaxed, and a peaceful smile appeared. "It's delicious," she said. Tom sat across from her, sipping his coffee with a small, proud smile. "Glad to hear it." They ate quietly for a few minutes, the gentle morning light filling the room. Cooper eventually wandered in, sniffing the air happily. Lena reached down to pet him, and Cooper nuzzled her leg like he had known her for years. "He really likes you," Tom said from behind his mug. Lena giggled, a sound he hadn't heard from her before. "I like him too. He makes the morning feel happy." The simple sentence warmed Tom's heart. She spoke with honesty, something rare and refreshing. When breakfast was finished, Lena helped clear the dishes. She moved carefully, not wanting to break anything, and her quiet movements filled the kitchen with a soft, peaceful energy. "You don't have to help," Tom said gently. I want to, she replied. It feels nice to help here. Her words made Tom feel unexpectedly touched. He wasn't used to someone helping in the kitchen. He wasn't used to company at all. After the dishes were done, they both stood near the window, watching the sunlight glitter on the snowy fields. The world looks so calm, Lena whispered. It feels different from last night. It does, Tom agreed. That's how winter storms work here, wild one night, peaceful the next. She nodded slowly. I was so scared yesterday, I didn't know what would happen, but now everything feels safe, like a miracle. Tom looked at her carefully. You went through something difficult. You don't have to pretend you weren't scared. Anyone would have been. She looked at him with gratitude. Thank you for not making me feel foolish. You're not foolish, Tom said. You're strong, stronger than you probably realize. Her eyes softened, touched by his sincerity. A sudden vibration made her jump slightly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, which had finally regained signal. Her screen lit up with several missed messages. Her heart thumped as she opened them. Tom noticed her expression changing, the slight shock, the disbelief, the growing relief. Everything okay? He asked quietly. She looked up at him with eyes filled with emotion. It's my cousin, she said breathlessly. She messaged me. She found a place for me. A temporary room at her friend's house. And she said she can help me sign up for a community program. I didn't think she would reply so soon. Tom smiled warmly. That's good news, really good news. Lena nodded, blinking back grateful tears. I was so worried I might not find help, but now I can go to Seattle and start again. Tom was happy for her, even if he felt a tiny ache in his chest at the thought of her leaving. He had just met her, but he already felt a quiet connection, something gentle and unexpected. Do you want me to drive you to the bus station? He asked kindly. She nodded. Yes, please, if it's not trouble. It's no trouble at all, Tom said warmly. We'll leave when you're ready. She stood there silently for a moment, still absorbing the good news. Then she looked at him with eyes full of gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You don't have to, he replied softly. You already did by being safe. After she packed her small bag, they stood by the front door. Tom handed her a wool scarf, one that looked older but well cared for. It belonged to my mother, Tom said gently. It's very warm. I want you to have it for the rest of your trip. Lena looked startled. I cannot take something so important. I want you to, Tom interrupted softly. It's from someone who believed in kindness. She'd be happy if it helped someone in need. Lena held the scarf in her hands, touched by its softness and by the meaning behind it. She pressed it close to her chest and nodded deeply. Thank you, she whispered. I will take good care of it. Tom opened the door, and together they stepped outside. The sun reflected off the snow so brightly that the world looked pure and almost magical. As they walked toward the truck, Cooper followed them, tail wagging slowly. Lena bent down and hugged him gently. Goodbye, Cooper, she said softly. Thank you for keeping me company. Tom helped her into the truck and drove toward town. The road was clear now, the sky bright blue, and everything felt fresh and full of possibility. They reached the bus station, and Tom helped her carry her bag. The bus was already waiting, humming quietly. Lena turned to him, her eyes warm but emotional. You changed my Christmas, she said. You changed how I see people. I will never forget what you did for me. Tom swallowed gently, his voice soft. I'm glad I could help, and I hope your new beginning is a good one. She nodded, wiping the corner of her eye. Thank you for giving me safety when I had none. Then she stepped back, giving a small bow, a gesture of deep respect. Tom nodded in return, touched more than he expected. Lena climbed onto the bus, turned back for one last look, and smiled at him, soft, grateful, unforgettable. As the bus pulled away, Tom watched it until it disappeared around the snowy bend. He stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, the winter sun warming his face. He felt a gentle tug inside his chest, a feeling of connection, hope, and something like quiet joy. He didn't know if he would ever see her again, but he knew this. No one should be alone on Christmas. And on that winter morning, kindness had created a memory that would stay with both of them forever. The bus disappeared slowly down the snowy road, growing smaller and smaller until it looked like a tiny silver dot against the white landscape. Then at last it faded completely from sight. Tom stood there for a while, his boots planted firmly in the snow, his breath forming gentle clouds in the morning air. The sky was calm now, sunny and bright, as if the world itself had decided to begin the day with a hopeful heart. He felt a mixture of emotions, relief that Lena was safe, happiness that she had found a place to go, and a soft, lingering sadness that surprised him. It wasn't a deep sadness, but the quiet kind that comes when someone kind and gentle leaves your life after touching it in a small but meaningful way. Eventually, he turned back toward his truck, brushing snow off his coat as he walked. Cooper, who had been waiting patiently in the passenger seat, looked at him with concerned eyes, as though he knew something had shifted. Tom smiled and rubbed the dog's fur before climbing inside. "Let's go home, boy," he said softly. The ride back to the ranch felt different than the night before. The roads were clear now, the snow gleaming like crystals, the sky a peaceful shade of blue. But even with all that beauty around him, Tom felt a gentle quietness inside, a silence that wasn't empty, just thoughtful. He couldn't stop thinking about Lena, about the fear in her voice when she talked about being stranded, the hope in her eyes when her cousin's message arrived, and the grateful smile she gave him right before boarding the bus. He didn't know her well, but he had seen enough to understand that she was someone strong, someone kind, someone who had carried more struggles on her shoulders than she ever admitted. When he reached the ranch, he parked the truck and stepped out slowly. The wind was soft now, carrying the faint smell of pine. Cooper ran ahead, kicking up small puffs of snow with each excited step. Tom followed him to the front porch and paused for a moment, feeling the familiar warmth of home reach out to him. Inside, the house was quiet again, peaceful but a little different. It felt like the air still held traces of her presence, like a memory that hadn't quite settled yet. Her chair was still slightly pulled out from breakfast. A corner of the guest blanket was still folded differently on the bed from when she had rested there. Even Cooper kept sniffing around, searching for the scent of the friend he had made overnight. Tom walked through the kitchen and stopped near the table. He rested his hand on the wooden surface, remembering how Lena had carefully placed her hands there while eating, how she had looked around with shy curiosity, how she had moved as if trying not to disturb the peace of the house. It amazed him how someone could stay for such a short time and still leave a lasting warmth in a place. He made himself a cup of coffee and sat in his usual chair, watching the soft steam rise into the air. He thought about the way she had said goodbye, the sincerity in her voice, the way her eyes had shined when she talked about starting over. Something about her spirit lingered in his mind like a gentle melody. After a while, he stood up and went outside to begin his usual chores. He fed the horses, brushed the snow off the fences, and checked the barn doors. The ranch work kept his hands busy, but his mind drifted again and again to the memory of her stepping onto the bus. He wondered if she was thinking about the ranch too. He wondered if she had eaten lunch, if she had reached the next bus stop safely, if she had felt nervous traveling alone again. By midday, the sun was high, making the snow gleam brightly. Tom walked to the edge of his property and looked at the long stretch of land that seemed to go on forever. He thought about how life sometimes brought unexpected moments, strangers crossing paths for reasons neither could predict. Maybe this was one of those moments. Maybe it was simply meant to happen, meant to remind him that kindness mattered, that connection could appear even in the quietest corners of life. That evening, when Tom entered his house again, the silence felt different, not lonely but reflective. He warmed leftovers for dinner and sat at the table. Across from him, the empty chair reminded him of how she had smiled softly at him that morning, how she had told him that the house felt safe. He couldn't remember the last time someone had said something like that about his home. After dinner, he went to the fireplace and added a log, sitting down to watch the flames dance. The warmth spread through the room, and he thought about the scarf he had given her, the one that had belonged to his mother. He hoped it would keep her warm in Seattle. He hoped she would wrap it around her neck on windy days and remember that someone had cared enough to offer kindness when she needed it most. Hours passed. The sky grew dark again, and the stars began to sparkle like tiny lanterns hanging in the night. Tom finally got up, ready to sleep. But before heading to his room, he paused and looked toward the guest room door. It was closed now, quiet and still. He stepped closer and rested his hand gently on the doorknob, not to turn it, but just to feel the reminder of the brief life that had filled that small space. He knew she wouldn't be back tonight or even tomorrow, but he also knew he wouldn't forget her. Her story, her quiet bravery, and her gentle presence would stay with him like a warm memory. In her own way, she had brought something soft and meaningful into his world. Meanwhile, far away on the road, Lena sat on the bus, holding the wool scarf gently in her lap. She traced her fingers along its soft edges, feeling the warmth still clinging to it. Every time she inhaled, she caught the faint scent of Tom's home, a mixture of pine, warm wood, and something comforting she couldn't fully describe. She gazed out the window, watching the snowy countryside pass by. Each mile brought her closer to Seattle, to her cousin, to a new beginning. But with every passing moment, her thoughts kept drifting back to the ranch. The quiet kitchen, the warm fire, Cooper's gentle eyes, and Tom's kind voice telling her she was safe. She had spent many months feeling like she didn't belong anywhere. But for one night in that small house surrounded by snow, she felt sheltered, understood, and welcomed. As she leaned against the window, she whispered a soft promise to herself. "I will do better, I will be strong, and I will remember his kindness." The bus driver announced the next stop, and Lena sat up a little straighter. Her journey was continuing, but she didn't feel alone anymore. The scarf around her neck felt like a warm anchor, reminding her that good people still existed, even in the coldest storms. Hours later, she arrived in Seattle. Her cousin met her with open arms and warm tears. Lena smiled with relief, but inside her heart she carried the memory of Montana, the safety she had felt, the gentle conversation, and the kindness that had changed everything. In the days that followed, she settled into her cousin's small home and began planning her next steps: language classes, part-time work, and a new stability she had been searching for. Every night she wrapped herself in the wool scarf before sleep, feeling comforted by the simple gift. She didn't tell her cousin the full story right away. Some experiences felt too personal, too special. She kept that night close to her heart like a quiet treasure. Back in Montana, Tom continued his daily life: the ranch, the animals, the quiet nights. But something inside him had shifted. The memory of Lena softened the long winter days. Sometimes he would look at the road and wonder how she was doing. He wondered if she was warm, if she felt safe, if she had found the happiness she talked about. He never expected to see her again. He didn't hope for it or plan for it. He simply carried the moment in his heart, grateful for the way it had touched his life. Some connections are brief but powerful. Some meetings are unexpected but meaningful. And some kindnesses echo long after they're given. On that snowy Christmas Eve and the bright morning after, two strangers had crossed paths for just a short time. But in that short time, they shared warmth, hope, and a reminder that goodness still existed in the world. And though they walked different paths from that day on, they both remembered the same simple truth. Sometimes, a single act of kindness can change the course of two lives forever.